The last of the daylight is lying flat along the water, and the city above it has gone the color of old honey. Gulls turn over the harbor without hurrying anywhere. On the highest ground a great dome holds the light a little longer than the roofs below it, the way a bowl holds the last of the milk. Down at the shore, the ferries are making their final crossings. The oars sound tired. Good evening, and welcome to Worlds Before Morning. Wherever you're lying tonight, let the pillow take the whole weight of your head. Nothing here needs deciding. The lamps are already lit in the streets we're going to walk, and they're never very far apart. You can let your eyes close whenever they want to close, and the walking will go on without you. We're in Constantinople, in the late autumn of about the year 550. The city sits on a triangle of land with water on two sides of it, and tonight we're going to go slowly around the inside of that triangle. There's no hurry at all. Every street we take runs downhill to water in the end. 3 things are waiting for us before the sky changes. We'll stand under the dome of the new great church, while a man on a ladder trims the lamps. The building is so wide that the far end of it goes soft. We'll go down damp steps into a cistern, where more than 300 columns stand in still black water. They hold up a ceiling nobody was ever meant to admire. Near morning we'll be in a baker's street, in the warm draft off the ovens, while the sky over the Strait is still the color of wet slate. If these long nights help you rest, a subscription keeps them coming. That is the only thing asked of you this evening. From here on there's nothing but the quiet, and the city, and one voice going slowly downhill toward the sea. So let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw come unclenched. The light is nearly gone off the water now. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. The land walls run from the water in the north, down to the water in the south. The sun is going down behind them. From out here on the western side, they don't look much like defense. They look like a low range of hills that somebody squared off and left standing across the plain. There are 2 lines of them, an inner wall and a shorter outer wall, with a dry ditch beyond that. The stone is banded with courses of flat red brick, so the whole length is striped, pale and rust, all the way to the horizon in both directions. In this light, the brick has gone the color of a ripe fig. The mortar between the courses is thick, almost as thick as the bricks themselves, and up close you can see the pebbles in it. Put your hand flat on the outer face. The stone is already cold, colder than the air, because stone lets go of the day faster than the air does. It's the last of autumn here. The wind is coming off the plain out of the northwest, dry and thin. It smells of dust and cut stubble, and the sour green of the vegetable plots that people work right up against the ditch. These walls went up under an emperor named Theodosius. That was more than 100 years before tonight, and they've been mended in places since. You can see the mending if you look for it, because the newer brick sits a shade lighter, and the courses don't quite line up. Somewhere along this length, there's a repair inscription cut into a tower, boasting in a modest way about how fast the work was done. Nobody out here is reading it now. The light is going. The carts are coming in on the road below us, the last of them, wheels grinding on the paving. They've been out in the market gardens since before dawn. One is stacked with cabbages packed in loose straw, another with leeks tied in bundles by their white ends, another with clay jars roped upright so they can't knock together. The oxen are walking with their heads low. Nobody is shouting at them. Everybody knows the way in. The gate ahead is a tall arched opening with its doors folded back. The paving underneath it is worn into 2 shallow grooves by wheels. Go through with the carts. The noise changes at once. Out on the plain the sound went away from you in all directions. In the gate passage it comes back off the stone, close and boxy, hooves and axles, and one man clearing his throat. Then you're inside, and the ground tilts up, and the city is laid out ahead in the last of the light. Roofs of red tile, one behind another, going up over 3 low hills. Cypress trees standing black and narrow between the houses. A long, straight colonnaded street running east, catching the last of the sun on its columns. Smoke standing up from 1,000 small fires, all of it leaning the same way. Behind us, the gate leaves are being pushed shut for the night. The hinges are enormous, and they complain the whole way. Then there's a wooden bar dropping into its brackets, one flat knock that you feel in the paving under your feet. The wind stops at the wall. Inside, the air is warmer. It smells of bread. Come down the northern slope toward the water. It's a steep walk, and the streets here are narrow and stepped in places. The steps are worn into hollows in the middle, where everyone has put their feet for 2 centuries. Below you is the inlet the city calls the Horn. It's a long finger of quiet salt water pushing inland from the Strait, sheltered on both sides by high ground. It's the reason there's a city here at all. Ships can lie in it in any weather. That is not a small thing. Along most of this coast, a ship at anchor is a ship the wind can still reach. The water at this hour is doing something particular. The sun is gone behind the hills to the west, but the sky above the western hills is still pale. The Horn holds that paleness and gives it back flat and silver, so the whole inlet looks brighter than the land around it. The hulls sitting on it have gone entirely black. You can count the masts by the gaps in the light. Across the inlet on the far side, there's a smaller settlement on the north bank, a place the city calls Siki. It has its own theater and its own quays, and its own way of doing things. People row back and forth all day in small boats for a coin. The ferrymen are pulling in for the night now. You can hear a boat come alongside its mooring somewhere below, wood knocking on wood twice, then a rope going tight. Now the question of the chain, because you'll have heard about it. Later in this city's long life, a great iron chain was strung across the mouth of the Horn on floats, to close the harbor to any ship that had not been let in. Whether such a chain already lay across the mouth on our night is honestly not settled. The clear, detailed accounts of it come from centuries after this one. Some historians think an earlier version existed and simply went unremarked. Others think it did not. Anyone who tells you firmly either way is going past what the evidence will carry. What is certain tonight is the mouth itself. Stand where you can see it off to the right, where the Horn opens into the Strait. The water changes there. Inside, it's flat and dark and patient. Out in the Strait, there's a current running down from the north, strong enough to be visible as a seam. And even in this light, you can see the surface moving faster out there, catching the sky in long streaks. Low over the western hills, there's a thin, bright cut of a moon, a few days old. It will be down before the second watch, and it gives almost nothing to see by. A late boat is coming in through that seam now, a small one, oars only. The rower is working across the current and letting it carry him, so he crosses in a long slant. He isn't hurrying either. He has done this in the dark a great many times. Sit a moment on the low wall here. The stone is warm on top and cold underneath. Below you, somebody is washing something in the shallows with slow, scooping sounds. A gull complains once and gives it up. The masts are all one color now. The silver is going out of the water. Down at the water, the quays are stone, laid in long blocks, with iron rings set into them and mooring stones the size of a sheep. Walk out along one of them. The boards of a gangplank are under your feet for 3 steps, springy, and then you're on stone again. The ships tied up here are round-bellied merchantmen, wide and deep and not very fast. They are built for carrying, not for chasing anything. One of them has been unloading grain most of the afternoon, and there's a fine dust of it lying on the quay. So pale you can see it in the last light, and it grits under your shoe. The smell along here is layered and easy to take apart. Tar first, from the caulking and the standing rigging, then wet rope, which has its own smell, a little like a wet dog, then the sourness of the bilges, which is what a wooden hull smells like on the inside after a long crossing. Under all of it, the harbor itself, weed and cold salt and the mud that comes up when a hull settles at low water. The hulls creak. That's the sound you'll take away from this quay. It isn't loud. It comes at odd intervals as the swell that gets in from the Strait lifts each ship a hand's width and puts it back down. The timbers work against each other, and every rope in the ship takes up and lets go. Look at the cargo, still standing on the stone under an oiled cloth. Tall clay jars, an amphora each, pointed at the bottom so they can't stand up alone. They lie in wooden cradles, or lean against each other in rows. Some hold oil, some hold wine, some hold fish sauce. You can tell which by the shape of the shoulder, and the stamp pressed into the clay handle. The stamps say where the jar was made, and sometimes who filled it. Nobody here needs to read them. They read the shape. The grain matters more than any of it. This city eats bread it does not grow. Ships come up from Egypt through the summer sailing season with wheat in their holds. The wheat goes into state granaries, and out of the granaries it goes to the bakers. In a few weeks the season closes. The winter storms make the crossing a bad bet, so the last ships are in now or nearly in. The granaries are as full as they will be until spring. A city this size lives all winter on what was carried across water before the weather turned. A sailor is sitting on the rail of the nearest ship with his legs hanging over, eating something out of a cloth. His feet are bare, and they are the color of the deck. He has the look of a man who has already been paid. Beyond them, the last small craft are coming in and rafting up against one another. Their masts lean slightly different ways, so the whole line of them looks like a comb with a few teeth out. Between the hulls, the water is black and thick and stays flat. A ship's cat crosses the quay ahead of us at a walk, in no hurry, and disappears between two crates. Somebody laughs on a deck out in the dark. The rigging taps once, then it's quiet again. Behind the quays, the ground rises in one short step, and the warehouses begin. They are long stone buildings with narrow doors and very few windows. The windows they have are high up and barred, because what's inside is worth stealing and nobody here is confused about that. The doors stand open at this hour, and lamps are burning inside. Look in as you go past. The floors are stone, swept, slightly hollowed along the paths people walk. Sacks stand in stacks taller than a man, and between the stacks there are gaps left on purpose so a lamp can be carried through without touching anything. In one building the sacks are grain. In the next, woolen greasy bales that you can smell from the street. In the next, timber stacked with laths between the layers so the air moves. The porters are finishing. These are men who carry things for a living. You can tell them by how they stand when they're not carrying, which is very straight, with the shoulders let all the way down. They work in pairs on a pole, or alone with a sack held on the back of the neck, and both hands up holding the corners. Watch the man coming up the ramp now. He has a sack on his back, and he is taking small, even steps and breathing out on each one. A soft sound, half a hum. That sound is doing work. It keeps the rhythm, and it keeps him from holding his breath. Every load-carrying trade anyone has ever recorded has some version of it. He tips the sack onto the stack, and the dust comes off it in a puff that goes gold as it passes the lamp. Then he stands there for a second with his hands on his hips, looking at nothing, letting his back come back to him. A clerk sits at the door with a wax tablet on his knee and a bronze stylus. Every load that goes in gets a mark. He works the stylus point for the marks and flattens his mistakes with the flat end, which is why the tablet is shiny in patches. When he's done, he'll copy the total onto papyrus, and the wax will be smoothed and used again tomorrow. Wax is for today, ink is for keeping. The lamps in the warehouse doors start going out along the row. One, then another further off, then two together. A door pulls shut, and a bar goes across it inside with a wooden thud. Keys here are iron and heavy, and hang on a cord at the belt. You can hear a man walking by the sound of his keys before you see him. The porters go up the lane in a loose group, not talking much. One of them is rolling his shoulder as he walks. Another is chewing something. Their shadows swing long across the wall when they pass the last open door, and then let go of it. The lane smells of dust and rope and cold stone now. The warehouses have gone quiet the way a barn goes quiet. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. The last door shuts on the watchman inside. A lamp stays lit. Come back up into the streets. The dark has properly arrived now. The flat blue kind that comes before the sky goes fully black. This is the hour when the city decides how much of itself it wants to see. There are lamps out here, which surprises people. Not everywhere and not many, but along the main colonnaded streets and at the crossings and in front of certain buildings, hanging from brackets or standing on posts under the porticos. Later writers make a point of it, that a person could walk certain streets of this city at night without a torch. Later writers also like to praise, so hold that a little loosely. What we can say is that some streets were lit, and that this was worth remarking on. Here comes the man who does it. He's carrying a small covered flame in a punched metal case, and a jar of oil with a spout. There's a rod as well, with a hook on the end for pulling the lamps down within reach. He does the same brackets in the same order every evening. Watch him do one. Hook, pull. The lamp swings down on its chain and turns a little as it comes. He steadies it with the back of his hand, not the palm, because the palm is what he needs. Then the oil, poured slow and stopped early, because a lamp filled to the brim will slop and waste. Then the wick pinched out to a fresh length between finger and thumb. Then the flame from the case, held to the wick until it takes. The light comes up yellow and unsteady for a moment before it settles. He lets the lamp go, and it rises back up the chain and swings. The shadows of the column capitals swing across the ceiling of the portico with it, back and forth, slower each time. Then he moves on. The lamps burn olive oil, and the smell is not unpleasant. It's warm and slightly nutty, with a thread of smoke through it. Get too close, and the smoke catches at the back of the throat. But from the middle of the street, it just makes the air feel occupied. What the light actually does is small. Each lamp makes a circle maybe 5 or 6 paces across on the paving, and between circles there's dark. So walking a lit street at night is a matter of going from one pool to the next. Your own shadow swings around you as you pass under each one. Long ahead, short underfoot, long behind. Anyone in this city could walk their own quarter in complete darkness. The lamps are for strangers and for the nervous. Under the portico on the right, a shopkeeper is putting up shutters. The boards drop into a groove one after another, wood on wood, and the last one has a peg through it. The lamp above his door he leaves burning. Most people do. A dark front means an empty house, and an empty house invites a certain kind of visitor. The lamplighter has reached the crossing ahead and is standing under the last bracket, waiting for the flame to take. From here he is only a shape with a spark at chest height. Then that spark climbs up into the air and hangs there and steadies. He goes on. The street is a string of small moons. Turn left at the crossing, and you'll smell it before you see it. Bread, and under the bread, wood smoke, and under that the faint sourness of dough that has been standing since morning. This is a street of bakers, one after another, the way trades gather in this city. The ovens are domed brick, built into the back wall of each shop. Each one has an iron door, and a mouth blackened above it by every fire it has ever held. In the daylight, there's a queue outside every one of these doors. At this hour, the shelves are nearly bare, and the last customers are picking over what's left. Go in the nearest one. The heat meets you at the threshold like a hand on the chest. It's the dry heat of brick that has been hot since before dawn. After a moment on the cold street, it is almost too much, and then it's exactly right. This is the warmest room you'll stand in tonight, warmer than the baths, and every baker's shop in the world has known it. The floor is dusted with flour, and the flour has been walked into patterns. There's a wooden trough along one wall where the dough is mixed, worn smooth and pale inside from years of scraping. A long-handled peel leans in the corner, its blade thin and scorched at the edges. On the shelf, the last loaves, flat rounds, dark on the bottom, with a scatter of ash on them from the oven floor that nobody bothers to brush off. Buy one or watch someone buy one. Payment is a small bronze coin with a big letter on the back of it, and it changes hands with almost no ceremony. Bread is the one thing everybody in this city buys every day. The price of it is watched from very high up, because a city that cannot buy bread is a city with a problem the emperor will hear about. Some bread here isn't bought at all. Certain households hold an old entitlement to a daily ration, attached to the house itself rather than the person, a thing inherited from the way the older Rome fed its people. It's written down somewhere in an office. The loaves come out of the same ovens. The baker himself is sitting on an upturned tub with his forearms on his knees. His arms are white to the elbow, and there are darker lines in the creases. He has been up since the middle of the night, and he'll be up again in the middle of this one. So his day is folded strangely, with a long sleep in the afternoon in a back room where the wall is warm. His boy is raking out the oven for the night. The ash comes forward in a gray wave and gets shoveled into a bucket. And the ash isn't waste. It goes for scrubbing, for the laundry trade, for the fields. Almost nothing in this city gets thrown away that can be used twice. Stand a moment longer in the doorway, half in the heat and half in the cold, which is the best place in the shop. The bread in your hands is heavy for its size, and the crust ticks faintly as it cools. Outside, the street has gone properly dark. The oven mouth behind you throws your shadow out onto the paving, thin and long. The iron door swings shut. The heat goes with it. Come up out of the baker's lane onto the main street. It has a name that simply means the middle street, the Mese. It runs from the western gates all the way to the old heart of the city, and once you're on it, you can't get lost. It's wide, wider than you expect for its age, wide enough for carts to pass each other with room over, and down both sides it's lined with colonnades. That's the thing to feel here. You are walking under a roof and out in the open at the same time. The columns stand in a long row on your right, and beyond them the street. Beyond that another row going the other way, and the two rows fall away ahead of you into the dark until they touch. Behind the colonnade on your left, the shops, all shut now. Each one is a single deep room with a wide opening onto the walkway. The opening is closed for the night, with boards dropped into a groove in the sill. Some have a small lamp burning in a niche above the boards. Some have a scratched sign on the lintel, a fish, a shoe, a bunch of grapes, for the many people who buy without reading. Run your hand along the boards as you pass. They are smooth from years of being handled and slightly greasy at hand height. In front of one shop somebody has left a stack of shallow baskets, weighted down with a stone so the wind can't take them. The day's traffic has left its evidence everywhere. A straw, a cabbage leaf gone limp, a snapped bit of basket, wet patches where a water cellar emptied out. In the daytime, this street is a solid river of people. There are records of men being fined for blocking the walkway with their goods, which tells you exactly how much they did it. Now it holds maybe a dozen people in the length you can see. Two men walking together and arguing about money in a friendly way. A woman with a covered basket moving quickly going home. A boy leading a donkey with empty panniers. And the donkey's hooves are the loudest thing in the street. The columns have capitals up in the dark that nobody can see at this hour. Some are old and reused, carried here from somewhere else and set on new shafts, and they don't match. Once you notice that, you notice it everywhere in this city. Half of what is standing here has stood somewhere else first. Ahead, where the street opens out, there's a tall marble structure with arches on four sides. People call it the Million, and it's the point from which distances are measured. The stone that says every road begins here. Milestones out in Thrace are counted from this thing. On its faces there are statues and inscriptions, and a great deal of civic pride in stone. Walk under it, 4 arches, so 4 squares of sky, each a slightly different shade of black. Your footsteps go up into the vault and come back a half beat late. The colonnade starts again on the far side. The lamps go on ahead like stitching. Past the marked stone, the street opens into a square. The square is large enough that the buildings around it feel like a distant edge rather than walls. This is the ceremonial heart of the place. It has a name, the Augustaian, and there is enough open paving in it to make your footsteps sound thin. On the far side of the square, there's a building that changes the size of everything else. You've been seeing its dome since the plain outside the walls. Up close, the dome goes out of sight behind the mass of the lower structure. And what you get instead is a great sloped stack of brick and stone rising in stages, windowed, absolutely enormous, and not especially graceful from outside. This building keeps everything it has for the inside. Most people here simply call it the Great Church. It has another name as well, Hagia Sophia, which means Holy Wisdom, and both names are in ordinary use. It's new. That's the thing people in this city keep saying about it, because most of them remember the building that stood here before. Most of them remember watching this one go up. It was finished and dedicated a little over 10 years before tonight. The men who designed it were not builders by trade, but a geometer from Tralles named Anthemius, and another named Isidore. It shows in the best possible way. The thing is a piece of mathematics that you can walk into. The doors on this side are set under a long porch. They are tall, and the door leaves are bronze over wood, with heavy studs and a raised frame. They are polished dark at the height where hands push. Everyone pushes in the same place. Wood and bronze remember it. There's a doorkeeper standing just inside with a lamp. He isn't stopping anyone. At this hour, there are always a few people coming and going, and there's a service in the night that some of them are here for. He has the settled look of a man who has stood in this doorway on 1,000 evenings and expects nothing unusual from this one. Push the leaf. It's heavier than it looks, and it moves more easily than it should, because the pivot is set well and greased. Then there's an inner porch, long and narrow, running the whole width of the building, vaulted overhead, its floor a pale marble worn into softness. This is the room where you stop being outside. The sound changes here first, before the light does. Out in the square, your voice went off across the paving and did not come back. In this porch it comes back. A cough from the far end arrives a moment after it happens, thinned out and rounded off. You understand at once that the building ahead is going to do something much larger with sound than this. Ahead, there are 9 openings into the church itself, and the middle one is the tallest. It is closed with a curtain tonight rather than a door. Light comes around the edges of the curtain, not lamplight as you know it from the street, not a small yellow circle. A wide, low, warm glow that spreads out across the porch floor and shows up every vein in the marble. Somebody ahead of us puts a hand to the curtain and moves it aside and lets it fall back. For a moment the light widens, then it narrows again. Go on. Step through and stop where you are because everybody does. The first thing is not the dome. The first thing is that the room does not have edges where you expect them. The floor runs away from your feet in pale marble, polished by feet into a low shine, and it goes and goes. Where you look for a wall, there are more columns, and behind those columns, another space with its own light in it. So the building keeps opening sideways past the point where a room should stop. Then you look up, and the ceiling is nowhere near where a ceiling should be. The dome sits over the middle on a ring of windows, 40 of them or near enough, set close together all the way round its base. At this hour they are black. Instead of daylight coming through them, there is lamplight going up at them from below. The ring catches that light along the sills and the piers between. So the base of the dome is a bracelet of small bright marks with darkness above and darkness below. That is the trick of the thing. The band of windows cuts the dome away from what holds it, so the shell overhead appears to float free with nothing under it. A writer of this century named Copyist, who saw it new, said the dome seemed suspended by a golden chain from heaven. He was not the first person to reach for that image, and he wasn't the last. Let your eyes come down slowly. Below the dome, 4 great arches. Under the arches, half domes at either end, and under those, smaller half domes again. So the space steps down toward you in shells, each one a little lower, each one holding its own quantity of light. Nothing in here is a straight line held for very long. Now the lamps, they hang on chains from the cornice, in rings and clusters. Hundreds of small glass cups of oil with floating wicks, set in bronze and silver frames. They hang low. That's what surprises people who only know the building from pictures. The light lies down at head height and just above, in a great scattered layer, and everything above that layer is dim and enormous. You stand in the lit part, and the building goes up into the dark. There's a man with a long pole and a lamp on the end of it, trimming and refilling along one rank. He works from a movable stair. When he sets the frame swinging, the whole rank of little flames swings with it. The reflections travel across the polished floor and across the columns in a slow wave that takes a long time to die out. Sound arrives late in here. Somebody sets down a metal stand 200 paces away, and the sound reaches you soft, with its edges gone. If a voice is raised, the room holds it for several seconds after the voice has stopped. Everybody who works in this building speaks quietly, not out of respect only, but because loud does not work here. Loud turns to mud. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. Stand still. Let the room be as big as it is. Somewhere behind the screen, one voice starts low. Walk to the side, into the aisle, where the columns stand in 2 levels, and there's a gallery running above your head. It's quieter here, and darker, and this is where you can see what the walls are actually made of. They are not painted. They are covered, sheets of marble sawn thin and set edge to edge. The sawing was done in a particular way, so that 2 neighboring sheets are 2 halves of the same block opened like a book. The veins on one side mirror the veins on the other. Where the marble is gray, it looks like weather coming in. Where it's yellow, it looks like something poured. Put your palm on it. It's cold and completely smooth, and there is a slight step where one sheet meets the next, no wider than a fingernail. Above the marble, higher up, the surfaces change to mosaic, and the mosaic is mostly gold. Not gold paint, small cubes of glass with gold leaf inside them, sealed under a thin film of clear glass on top. Each cube set at a slightly different angle by the hand that pressed it into the mortar. That angling is the entire point. A flat gold wall would be dull. A wall of thousands of slightly tilted mirrors picks up whatever light is going and throws it back from a different place each time you move. So the gold overhead is never evenly lit. It has a grain in it. As you walk down the aisle, the bright part travels with you, keeping level with your eye, like the shine that follows you along a wet road. At this hour, with only the hanging lamps burning far below, most of that gold is asleep. It reads as a warm brown darkness up there, with here and there a small hard glint where a cube catches a flame at exactly the right angle. Then a lamp swings, and a whole patch of ceiling wakes up for 2 seconds and goes out again. What was pictured in that gold in this century is a fair question, and the honest answer is that we mostly don't know. The great figures that later visitors described, and that people photograph today, were set into these walls in later centuries. In Justinian's building, the decoration seems to have been largely gold and plain, with crosses and borders and patterns rather than faces. Some of it was certainly changed more than once. Anyone who describes this ceiling tonight in confident detail is filling gaps. Look at the capital of the column beside you. The carving on it is not the old kind with stiff acanthus leaves standing out. It's cut deep and lacy, drilled through in places so the stone has holes in it. The effect in low light is that the capital looks less like carved rock and more like something woven. Letters are worked into the middle of it, tangled together into a single mark. Some of these marks carry the emperor's name, Justinian, and some carry the name of Theodora, the empress remembered alongside him. They are cut into stone all over this building, high up, where hardly anyone will ever look at them closely. The floor here has a hollow in it in front of the column, a real dish, worn by people standing in the same spot, not by walking, by standing. Then the singing starts properly from the other end, and it fills the space slowly the way water fills a shape. Stay for a while. There's nothing to do here but hear it. Out again through a side door, into cold air that feels thin after all that stone. Turn right and go a short way, and the ground opens out into the largest empty space in the city. The race course. On a race day, this holds a crowd that nobody has ever really counted. Tens of thousands of people on stone benches banked up around a long oval, all of them shouting at 4 teams of horses. Tonight there is nobody at all in it, and it is the loneliest place we will stand. Come in through one of the entrances at the level of the track. The passage is a stone tunnel with a barrel vault. It smells of dust and old horse, and the particular sourness of a place where large numbers of people have stood for a long time in the sun. Your footsteps knock along it. Then the tunnel ends, and the space opens up. It's long enough that the far end is not a wall, but a suggestion of one. The track runs away from you, flat sand and grit, raked at some point, and since then walked over by the odd dog. Down the middle of it runs a low masonry spine. Things stand on that spine, tall dark shapes with the stars behind them. The seating rises on both sides in tier after tier, and in this light it reads as a long shallow bowl, blank and gray. Down at the near end, the tiers curve round. Up on one long side, level with the middle, there's a covered box built into the wall of the palace, with columns across the front, where the emperor watches. Its curtains are drawn tonight. Walk out onto the sand. It gives slightly. It's damp under the top layer, because the dew is coming down now. And where you scuff it, the darker sand comes up. The quiet in here has a shape. Say something at a normal volume, and it goes out across the empty seating, and comes back off the far side with a delay long enough that you notice it. Clap once. The sound goes down the track and returns like a second clap from someone far away. People who work in the theater trade know these things and use them. Tonight, the only person testing it is you. There are 4 teams, and their supporters wear their colors, and the 2 big ones between them hold most of the city's loyalty. Fathers pass allegiance to sons like a trade. On race days, the noise off this bowl can be heard from ships out in the Strait, or so people say. The boasting may have grown in the telling. Tonight there's only the wind coming down the long axis, which is what long, empty spaces do with wind. A piece of cloth caught somewhere up in the seating that flaps twice and then stops. Look up at the stone benches. Names are scratched into them, and rough gaming boards, and the marks people cut to hold a place. Sit down on one. The stone has kept nothing of the day. It is cold straight through. A dog crosses the track ahead of us at a trot, nose down, on business of its own, and goes out through an arch. Above the spine, the sky is full of stars now. The sand holds our footprints. Walk down the middle of the track to the low wall that runs along it, the spine, and follow it. Things have been set up on this wall for hundreds of years, and every one of them was carried here from somewhere else. This spine is a shelf of trophies from other people's centuries. The tall one first. It's a single shaft of pink granite, square in section, tapering with a pointed cap. It stands considerably higher than any building near it. It was cut in Egypt for a king who lived nearly 2,000 years before tonight. It stood in a temple far up the Nile, and its 4 faces are covered from top to bottom in carved signs. Put your hand on it. Granite in autumn at night is a cold that comes up into the wrist. The carving is deep enough that your fingers drop into the grooves. Birds and seated figures and reeds, and a great many long ovals with signs inside them. Nobody in this city can read a word of it. That knowledge went quiet a few generations back. The people who walk past this stone every week treat the carvings the way you might treat the pattern on a rug. It stands on a marble base. The base is the interesting part for people who live here, because the base is theirs. It was carved when the stone was raised in this place, about 170 years before tonight, under the first emperor of that name, grandfather of the Theodosius, whose walls we stood under at dusk. Each face shows a crowd in the stands, the emperor in his box, musicians, dancers. On one face, the actual work of raising the thing, with ropes and capstans and men leaning into the bars. The inscriptions on the base are worth a moment because they don't agree with each other. One of them in Latin says the raising took 32 days. The other in Greek says 30. 2 texts cut into the same block at the same time, contradicting each other about a plain fact in public for everyone to see. Whoever was responsible either did not notice or did not mind. Further along the spine, there's a stranger object. 3 bronze snakes twisted around each other, rising from the ground, their bodies scaled and green with age. It's very old, older than the city by a long way. It was made far to the west, in Greece, out of the metal of a battle long finished. It stood at a famous shrine for centuries before it was brought here to stand in a racecourse. The bronze is cold and slightly rough, where hands have rubbed it for luck at the height a hand reaches. It's smooth and shows a dull yellow under the green. At the far end of the spine, there's another tall pillar, this one built of blocks rather than cut from one stone. It is sheathed in bronze plates, fixed to the stone, And by lamplight they give back almost nothing. Centuries from tonight the plates will be stripped off it. And what will stand here then is a rough masonry core full of square holes where the fixings were. Tonight it is still whole and still meant to impress. Between the big pieces there are smaller ones, statue bases with nothing on them, a stone basin, a short column with a sundial that can't be read at night and is a little out of true anyway. Walking this line takes a few minutes. The gravel changes underfoot from packed to loose and back again. Somewhere behind us, in the palace beyond the wall, a door closes. The stars have moved on a little. The obelisk points at them without meaning to. Time to go back into the streets. Leave the big spaces behind. Take the first narrow street going downhill, and then the next one. And inside a minute the city is a completely different size. These lanes are barely wide enough for two people to pass without turning. The buildings on either side go up 2 and 3, and sometimes 4 floors. The upper floors lean out over the street on wooden brackets, so the strip of sky above you is narrower than the lane itself. There are rules about how far a building may overhang, and how much daylight a neighbor is owed. The rules exist because people argued about it constantly. The walls down here are rough, rubble stone with brick courses through it, plastered in patches, whitewashed at some point and not lately. Where a downpipe comes off a roof, there's a green stain under it and moss in the joints. Everything you touch on this street is faintly damp now, because the dew is settling and these lanes never quite dry out in autumn. Go in through a low door on the right, into a family's rooms on the ground floor. 2 rooms and a yard. That's a normal amount of space for a working household in this city, and it holds more people than you'd think. The front room has a beaten earth floor with rush matting over most of it. In the middle there's a brazier, a shallow bronze bowl on 3 legs, with charcoal in it going from red to gray and then red again when someone moves. That is the only heating in the house, and it's enough, because the room is small and the ceiling is low and there are bodies in it. Supper is finished. There's a big shallow bowl on the floor mat with a wooden spoon lying across it, and what's left in it is the last of a pulse stew. Lentils cooked long with onion, and a little oil poured over at the end. Beside it a flat loaf, torn rather than cut, and a small dish of olives. A jug of wine mixed with water, in a proportion that would disappoint a modern drinker. The smells are stacked. Charcoal first, dry and slightly metallic, then the oil and onion, then wool because there's a lot of wool in this room, blankets and a cloak, and a basket of it waiting to be spun. Then faintly, the smell of the street, which comes in every time the door moves. An old woman sits closest to the brazier, with a spindle in her hands. She keeps it turning with a flick of 2 fingers and lets it drop. The thread lengthens out of the wool at her wrist, and she doesn't look at any of it. The spindle whirs, slows, and gets a fresh flick. That small sound is going to keep going for another hour. 2 children are asleep already on a low bench along the wall, under one shared blanket, one with an arm over the other's back. A man is mending a strap by the light with an awl and wax thread, working the point through, and pulling with his teeth on the free end. Nobody is saying much. Somebody says something about tomorrow and gets a hum back. Between 2 seas, the city keeps its own hours. The old woman lets the spindle drop again. The thread grows. Step out into the lane and go a few streets over to where the ground dips. The city is built on hills, and this is one of the valleys between them, and something enormous crosses it overhead. Look up. 2 tiers of arches, one row standing on top of another, marching across the valley from the hill behind us to the hill ahead. The piers are massive at the bottom and step in as they rise. The stonework is coursed gray blocks with brick lacing, and the arches are wide and plain. The whole thing is high enough that a 4-story house could stand under it with room to spare. At night it's a black shape with stars in the gaps. You feel it before you see it, because the lane goes colder in its shadow, the way a street does under a big tree. This is an aqueduct, and it was built under an emperor named Valens about 170 years before tonight. It is not the beginning of the water. It's the last stretch. The channel it carries comes from springs far out in Thrace, out past the farms and the woods. It runs and runs, following the contours, going the long way around every valley it can, and bridging the ones it can't. Nobody in the lane below is thinking about that, but the length of that line is one of the genuinely astonishing facts of this city. Traced out, with all its wanderings, it runs for a very great distance indeed. The people who have measured what survives of it call it the longest water line the Roman world is known to have built. Some of it is buried channel, some of it is arcade like this, some of it is tunnel cut through rock by men working from both ends toward each other. Climb the stairs beside the pier, the maintenance stair, and go up to the top. Up here the wind is back, moving steadily out of the north, and it's cold enough that you want your hands inside your sleeves. The channel itself is a stone trough about as wide as your shoulders, covered with slabs, with inspection openings left at intervals. Lift a slab and lean in. The sound comes up first, water moving fast in a confined space. Not a splash, but a continuous low rush with a hollow under it. Then the smell, which is nothing like the harbor. It's cold and clean and mineral, like the inside of a cave. Reach down and the water is icy and moving quickly enough to push at your fingers. There's a pale crust on the trough walls at the water line, layer on layer, built up over generations from the lime in the water. If you could cut through it, you could count the years in it like rings. Men walk this channel to keep it clear. It's a real trade and it's dark work, and it can be dangerous in the closed sections. There are laws about who may draw water off the line, and what happens to people who tap it illegally. Water theft was a persistent problem, and the punishments were written down more than once, which tells you the first writing down did not fix it. Come back down the stair. The rush of water fades as you descend. By the time your feet are on the lane again, you can't hear it at all. The arches stand over the street, and they will go on standing. They have time. There's a low building near the great church that looks like nothing at all. Plain walls, a plain door, no columns, no inscription worth reading. People walk past it every day without a glance. Go in because everything is underneath. Behind the door there's a flight of stone steps going down, and they turn once, and the air changes on the third step. It becomes cool and heavy and still. It carries a smell that is entirely its own. Wet stone and cold lime and something faintly green. At the bottom, a doorway. Go through it and stop. You're standing on a narrow ledge at the edge of a flooded hall. It runs away from you in every direction into the dark, and it is full of columns, and the columns are standing in water. Rows and rows of them, evenly spaced, going back until the lamp cannot reach any further. 12 rows across and 28 deep, 336 columns, holding up a brick vault about 2 men high above the water. Hold the lamp up. The light gets maybe 6 or 7 rows in before it gives up. What you see past, that is not darkness exactly. It's a suggestion of more columns, and then more. Then look down, and there they are again, upside down. The water is glassy still, and every column has a twin going down into it. The little flame in your hand has a twin too, far below in the black. The reflection is so complete that for a moment you can't tell how deep the water actually is. Drop a pebble and the whole hall breaks into rings, and every reflected column bends and wobbles. It takes a surprisingly long time for it all to go flat again. Sound is strange here. Everything is one note. There's a drip from somewhere off to the left. A single drop landing every few seconds with a plink that goes out into the space and takes ages to die. Speak and your voice comes back so wet and so rounded that you'll drop to a whisper without deciding to. This place was dug and roofed under the present emperor, less than 20 years before tonight, and its purpose is dull and entirely serious. Water comes in from the aqueduct line and sits here cool and dark. It goes out to buildings above when it's wanted. A city that depends on a channel from far away needs somewhere to keep a reserve, because channels can be cut and dry summers happen. Nobody wants to find out the hard way. At the far corner, at the foot of two of the columns, there are large carved blocks used as bases. Each one has a face on it, a big stone head with hair carved in coils from some earlier building. One is set on its side, one is upside down. Why they were placed that way is not known. It may be that those blocks were the right size, and the masons simply laid them the way they fitted. Guesses beyond that are guesses. The drip lands again. The rings go out and fade. Back up the steps, out into the ordinary night, which now feels warm by comparison. A few streets along there's a bathhouse, and it's shut, and shut is exactly when it's worth seeing. By day, this is one of the loud places in the city. There are large public baths and small neighborhood ones. This is a middling one, with a domed hot room and a warm room and a cold plunge. A court where men sit about far longer than washing requires. Bathing here is a social habit with a rhythm to it, and it costs almost nothing, and almost everybody goes. The attendant lets us in, because the lamps are still lit inside. Through the entrance court, past the benches and the pegs where clothes hang, and the floor is already warm underfoot. That's the first surprise. It's an empty building at night in late autumn, and the floor is warm. Go through into the hot room. It's a square chamber with a small dome and thick walls. There are marble basins along the sides and a shallow pool at the end. The air is heavy and damp, and it smells of wet stone and warm skin, and a little of the oil people rub on themselves and scrape off again. The dome is beaded with condensation, and every so often a drop lets go and lands in the pool with a tap. Take your shoes off. The floor here is genuinely hot. Not just warm, hot enough that you'd shift your feet. That's the whole invention. The floor you're standing on is not sitting on the ground. It's a slab held up on hundreds of little brick pillars. So there's a shallow, empty space under the entire room, and hot air and smoke from a furnace runs through that space, and then goes up flues built into the walls before it leaves by a chimney. The name for it is a hypocaust, and it means the fire is underneath. The wall flues are why the walls are warm too, and why the whole room heats evenly instead of scorching one side. Roman builders worked this out a long time before this city existed, and it works so well that it has barely changed. Go round the back to the furnace. There's a low arched mouth with a fire in it, banked down for the night, glowing dark red under a lid of ash. A stoker sits beside it on a stool with a rake across his knees. He'll feed it a few times before dawn to keep the mass of brick from going cold, because a cold bathhouse takes a full day to bring back, and nobody wants that argument in the morning. The wood is stacked against the wall in split lengths, and the whole corner smells of resin and hot ash. The heat off the fire on your face is enormous and stops about a pace away, so you can stand on the line and be hot on the front and cold on the back. Back through the hot room, the warm room, the cold plunge with its still black water. The lamps get put out behind us as we go, one, by the attendant walking us to the door. Outside the air is sharp and clean, and it goes right through the damp on your skin. Behind the wall, the fire settles. Something in the stack shifts and goes quiet. Now walk east, into the quarter where things are made. It's a district of narrow lanes, and the lanes are grouped by trade. So one is all leather, and the next is all metal, and the next is all wood. Your nose knows where you are before your eyes do. That grouping is not an accident. It's arranged and written into the rules that govern the trades, and it suits everyone concerned. A buyer who wants a lamp can compare 4 lamps in 50 paces. An inspector who wants to check weights can do a whole trade in a morning. A workshop that needs a particular tool can borrow it from 4 doors down. The leather lane first, and you'll smell it from the corner. Tanning proper is done outside the walls because nobody will live next to it, but the finishing is here. The smell that's left is heavy and sweetish and clings to the inside of your nose. The workshops are shut. Through a gap in the shutters you can see hides hanging on a rail in the dark, stiff and pale, like sheets left out too long. The marrow lane next. Cold now, all of it, but you can tell what happened here today. There's a fine dark grit on the paving in front of every door, iron filings and hammer scale, and it sticks to a damp shoe. Somewhere a piece of quenched work is still ticking as it cools. That faint, irregular tick metal makes for hours after the fire is done with it. Look through the open front of a smith's shop, half shuttered. The anvil sits on a section of tree trunk sunk into the floor. Hammers are ranged on a rack by size, handles all pointing the same way. Tongs hang from nails. There's a stone water trough with a skin of soot on the surface, and a bucket beside it. Everything is where a hand can find it in the dark, because a smith works with his eyes on the hot metal and not on his tools. Turn into the potter's lane. Here the smell is clay and wet dust and wood smoke. There are stacks of unfired pots standing in a covered yard under sacking, gray and soft-looking, and terrifyingly fragile at this stage. Nobody is allowed to run in that yard. A kiln at the back is closed and sealed with mud, and it will be warm to the hand until morning. Woodworking last, and this is the pleasant one. Shavings underfoot, curled and springy, and the smell of cut pine and of the glue pot, which is not a pleasant smell on its own but belongs here. A half-built chest stands on trestles, with its joints dry-fitted and pegs waiting. Someone has drawn out the next piece on the wall in charcoal, full size, so they can lay the timber against the line. These lanes are the reason the city can build anything at all. Everything in the great church, every hinge and lamp frame and nail and chain, came out of streets like this one, made by people whose names were not recorded. A cat sits in the middle of the potter's lane and watches us go past and does not move. Between 2 seas, the city keeps its own hours. The lanes are all shut now. Only one light left further along. That light is a glass workshop, and glass is the one trade that cannot simply stop when the sun goes down. A glass furnace takes a day and a night to come up to heat. Once it's hot, you use it while you have it. The front is open to the lane, and the heat rolls out of it into the cold, so the air above the doorway wobbles. Stand at the edge. The furnace is a domed brick beehive with a working hole in the side. Inside the hole, the light is a color that hurts to look at directly, orange going white at the middle. It lights the whole room from one point like a small sun in a box. Everything in the room casts a hard shadow away from that hole. The tools on the bench have shadows a full pace long. The blower's shadow crosses the ceiling when he moves. He has a long iron tube, and he dips the end into the pot inside the furnace and comes out with a lump of something on it that behaves like thick honey and glows dull orange. He rolls it on a flat stone to shape it. The sound of that rolling is a low grinding scrape, and it happens 2 or 3 times quickly before the glass cools. Then he blows down the tube. Not hard and not for long. The lump swells from the inside and becomes round. He turns the tube all the while with his other hand, so the weight doesn't drag it lopsided. The color drops from orange to red to a dark honey as it cools. The moment it stops moving, he puts it back in the fire for a few heartbeats and starts again. What he's making tonight is lamps, small glass cups with a rounded bottom, the kind that sit in a bronze ring by the hundred in every large building in this city, with oil in them and a wick floating on a bit of cork. The great church burns thousands, so do the baths, so does anyone who can afford it. The workshop floor is gritty with broken glass, swept into a corner. None of it is wasted. Broken glass goes back into the pot, and it melts more easily than raw ingredients. The fragments are sorted roughly by color into baskets. Every glassmaker in the ancient world hoarded their own breakage. Beside the furnace, there's a second smaller chamber, much cooler, where finished pieces go to sit for hours and come down to room temperature very slowly. Skip that, and the glass cracks itself apart days later for no visible reason. Whether the men doing it could have explained why is doubtful. They knew that it worked, which is a different kind of knowing, and it's the kind that most craft is built on. The blower's apprentice is working the bellows with his foot on a treadle, in a slow, steady rhythm. Every push makes the light in the working hole brighten and fade. The whole room breathes with it, brightening and dimming and brightening again. The blower breaks the finished lamp off the tube with a tap. It drops into a bed of ash. He looks at it for 1 second, decides it's fine, and reaches for the tube again. We should let them work. Step back into the lane. The cold takes your face immediately. Behind you, the light keeps breathing. There's a street of cloth merchants 2 turns from here, and even shut up for the night, it's the richest street we'll walk down. You can tell by the doors. They are thicker than the doors on the Potter's Lane. They have iron straps across them, and there are 2 lamps burning outside instead of 1. Cloth is money here. Wool and linen are ordinary and everywhere, and everyone in the city is wearing one or the other tonight. Silk is a different thing entirely, and the difference is not really about beauty. Ask what silk actually is in this city in this century, and the honest answer is that most people don't know. The thread arrives from somewhere far to the east, passed along through many hands. The last hands are usually Persian, and each pair of hands adds to the price. There are stories about how it grows. Some say it's combed off the leaves of certain trees. Some say worms make it. That last story is nearer the truth than the people telling it know. But here it sits as one guess among several rather than settled knowledge. The price follows from that. Raw silk has crossed a continent by the time it reaches a workshop in this city. The crossing is slow and risky, and controlled at every stage by people who take their cut. Then it's unwound and spun and woven here, in workshops that answer to the state, on looms that can hold a pattern. Then there's the dye, and the dye is its own story. The deepest purples come from a sea snail, and it takes an enormous number of the creatures to color a small piece of cloth. The work is done in yards near the shore, and it smells so foul that the yards are kept away from where people live. The finest grades of that purple are reserved by law. Certain cloths simply may not be sold, and wearing the wrong shade is not a fashion question. Look through the grill in the shutter of the nearest shop. There's a bolt of cloth on the counter that the merchant did not put away, half unrolled, with a cloth thrown over it. A lamp is burning inside on a bracket. Where the light falls across the silk, it does the thing silk does. The color changes as your eye moves, deeper here, brighter there, and it seems to be lit from underneath. That behavior is the whole reason for the price at court. A woolen cloak in lamplight is a woolen cloak. A silk one moves. There's something else worth saying, and it belongs to right about now. Within a few years of this night, the empire will begin to raise its own worms and make its own thread. The long dependence on the eastern road will loosen. A writer of this century tells the story of men who brought the eggs back hidden in a hollow staff. Whether it happened in exactly that way, with that staff, is not something anyone can check. What's clear is that the change came, and that it came around now, and that nobody standing in this street tonight knows it. A watchman goes past the end of the street with a lamp and looks down it, out of habit, and moves on. The two lamps outside the door burn steadily. There is no wind in here at all. The shutters stay shut. The silk keeps its color to itself. Above one of these shops there's a window with light in it, higher than the others, and behind that window a man is copying a book. Go up the outside stair. It's wooden, and it gives at the third step, and there's a rope along the wall instead of a rail. The room at the top is small and low, and has one table under the window and one stool and shelves along the back. He works with a single lamp, and a good deal of care about it. The lamp stands on a bracket that puts the flame slightly above and to the left of the page, so the light lands where he needs it and his hand doesn't cast a shadow across the line. Anyone who has written by an oil flame has worked this out. There's a bowl of water on the table beside the lamp, which is not for drinking. It's there because the room is full of parchment and papyrus and dry wood. One knocked lamp is the end of a year's work. The page he's copying from is propped on a slanted board at his left. His own page lies flat. Before he wrote a word, he ruled the sheet, pressing lines into it with a hard, blunt point, so they show as grooves without any ink. He pricked the margins to space them. If you tilt the page toward the lamp, you can see the ruling catching the light. His pen is a reed, cut to a chisel point. He recuts it with a small knife every so often, taking one thin sliver off and testing the nib on the corner of the sheet. The ink is in a squat pot with a narrow neck, so it can't easily spill. He dips shallow, wipes the nib on the rim, and writes about 6 or 7 letters before he needs to dip again. Watch the writing itself. The letters are rounded capitals, upright and even, and they run without gaps between the words. A whole line is one continuous chain of letters. Readers of this century are used to it, and read aloud or half, aloud to find the word breaks. That low murmur is the ordinary sound of a room where people are reading. He does not go fast. There's a rhythm of dip. 6 letters, dip, and every line ends with a glance back at the exemplar. When his eye slips and he copies the same phrase twice, he takes a knife to the parchment and scrapes the wrong letters away, and rubs the spot smooth with a piece of pumice, and writes over it. You can see 2 earlier scrapes on this page already, slightly rougher and slightly grayer than the rest. Parchment costs real money. Skins have to be limed and scraped and stretched and dried on a frame, and one book takes a flock. So old books are sometimes scraped clean entirely and written over with something the owner wants more. And centuries later people will hold those pages to the light and find the ghost of the older text underneath. The room smells of ink and lamp smoke, and the faint animal smell parchment never quite loses. Outside, the city has gone another notch quieter. He gets to the bottom of a page, blots nothing, waits. Then he lifts the sheet by 2 corners and turns it, and lays the next one down. The reed touches the page. The line begins again. Go down the stair and out past the cloth street uphill, to where the house is thin, and there's a wall with a plain gate in it. Behind that wall is a monastery, and something is about to happen that will carry a long way in this quiet. Wait here a moment first, because the waiting is part of it. It's the middle of the night now by the way this city counts, well past the hour when most lamps go out. The streets around us have almost nothing moving on them. There's a dog somewhere. There's the wind in a cypress, which is a dry sound, not a leafy one. Inside the gate, a man comes out of a doorway carrying two things. One is a long plank of hardwood, a little longer than his arm, thinned toward the ends and thicker in the middle, hung from a cord over his shoulder. The other is a wooden mallet. He walks to the middle of the yard and settles the plank so it hangs free, and steadies it with one hand. Then he begins to strike it. The sound is not what you expect from wood. It's high and hard and carrying, with a bright ring in it, closer to a struck stone than to a knock on a door. He strikes fast at first, a tight rolling pattern, then slower, then fast again, walking a little as he plays so the sound goes to every corner of the buildings around the yard. The board is called a sementron, and in the eastern monasteries it does the work that bells do elsewhere. Whether these communities used bells at all in this century is doubtful, and the surviving evidence for the early use of the board itself is thinner than people usually admit. What is well attested is the practice later. The practice later is extremely consistent, which is often a sign that something is older than the first person to write it down. Listen to how the sound behaves out here in the streets. It bounces. It comes off the wall opposite and arrives a second time, softer. Then it comes off something further away and arrives a third time, softer still. A single strike becomes a small crowd of strikes going away from you. In a city of stone and narrow lanes, this is a good instrument. A bell would boom and blur. The board is sharp enough to cut through and short enough not to smear. Windows do not open. Nobody looks out. In the houses around the monastery, this sound has come at this hour every night for as long as anyone in them has lived here. It's woven into the sleep of the whole quarter. People turn over. Somebody who is awake and worrying about money notes the hour without meaning to. The striking slows and thins. The last few blows are spaced wide, ringing out into the space between them, and each one gets a little more silence after it. Then he stops, and the last ring hangs on for a moment in the yard and lets go. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. Doors open on the far side of the yard, feet on stone, quiet, unhurried. He takes the board back inside. Follow the sound in. The gate is not locked, and there's a lay brother sitting inside it who nods at us and goes back to looking at nothing. The men crossing the yard are coming from cells and small shared rooms, and they've been asleep. It shows in the way they walk, which is careful rather than brisk. They carry no lights. They don't need them. Each one knows exactly how many paces from his door to the church door, and where the step is. Go in behind them. It's a small church, nothing like the great one, a plain hall with a semicircular end and a low vault. The whole of it would fit inside one aisle of the building we stood in earlier. That smallness is a relief now. The ceiling is close. The walls are close. There are lamps at the front only, a few of them hanging low on chains, and the rest of the hall is unlit. The lamps have that steady flame you get when there is no draft at all. The light on the wall behind them is orange, and it doesn't move. The air smells of cold stone, of oil, and of the resin they burned earlier, which has settled into everything and comes back up when the room warms with people in it. Then the singing starts. One voice first, low, unhurried, on a line that moves within a narrow range of notes and comes back to where it began. Then the others come in, not in harmony, all on the same line, so the sound thickens rather than widens. There are perhaps 20 of them, and 20 voices on one line in a small stone room makes a sound with a physical body to it. You can feel it in the wood of the bench under your hand. It goes on. That's the first thing to understand about this. It isn't a performance with a shape that builds to something. It's long and even, and the same phrases return. And the returns are the point. The men have this by heart. All of it, hours of it, learned young and repeated so many times that it runs while the mind is elsewhere. Watch the old one at the end of the row. His eyes are closed. His lips are moving with the line and slightly ahead of it, because he knows what's coming next better than he knows his own name. The rhythm is tied to breathe rather than to any beat. Phrases end when a breath ends, so the whole thing rises and settles at the speed a body breathes at, which is why it does what it does to a listener, and why the effect is much the same whether or not you follow a single word of it. We should stand at the back and not further in. This is theirs, and we're only passing. What we can take from it is the sound, and the low steady light, and the smell of the resin. The fact that this happens every night in the middle of the night in this city, in a great many rooms, while nearly everyone else sleeps. The line comes round to its beginning again, the way it has all night. Go out quietly. The yard is cold. The stars over the wall have swung west. Downhill again, into the broader streets, where two men are walking with a lamp between them. They are the watch. What exactly the watch consisted of in this city at this date is one of those things that everyone assumes and nobody can fully document. There was a city prefect with real authority over order and markets and building. There were men under him who walked at night, and there were also private watchmen paid by particular streets and particular trades. The neat, organized picture you might imagine is neater than the evidence. What these two are actually doing is easy enough to see. They walk the middle of the street rather than the sides. They carry one lamp low, at knee height, which is smart, because it lights the ground and doesn't blind them. They stop at every crossing and stand for a moment, and listen down each of the four ways before choosing one. They also try doors. Not all of them. The ones that matter. The storehouses and the money changers and the shop with the good lock. They try them by putting a hand flat on the leaf and giving one push. If it holds, they walk on. It takes them under a second each. Their footsteps are heavy on purpose, boots or thick soles and a deliberate tread, because half of what the watch does is be audible. A man thinking about climbing a shutter hears them 2 streets away and decides to go home instead. Nothing at all happens, and that is a good night's work. They talk in short exchanges with long gaps. Something about a brother-in-law, something about the price of charcoal, which is going up now that the cold is coming. Then nothing for 100 paces. At the corner, they meet a third man, leaning against a column with his arms folded. He's the watchman for this row of shops, hired by the shopkeepers between them. He has a stool inside a doorway, and a brazier he isn't supposed to have. They exchange a few words. He tells them about a drunk who was making a nuisance earlier, and went off toward the harbor on his own legs. That's the whole report. That's most nights. The lamp between the two of them throws their shadows out in front, joined at the feet, stretching and shortening as they pass each pool of street light. Where a lane runs off to the left, there's a black gap. One of them holds the lamp out toward it without breaking stride. The light reaches about 4 paces in, and shows a wall and a stack of empty baskets. They round the corner, and the sound of them goes on ahead of the light for a while, and then both fade. The street is empty again. A shutter taps twice and settles. There's a money changer's booth on the corner where the watch just passed, closed and barred, with a stone counter across the front that's worn into a dip in the middle from generations of coins being pushed across it. Sit on the step and think about what's in the purse of anyone walking past tonight, because the coinage of this empire is one of the quiet marvels of it. At the top there's the gold piece, the nomisma. It's small, about the width of a thumbnail, thin. It's struck to a standard that has held steady for more than 200 years. That steadiness is the point. A gold coin from this city is accepted far outside the reach of any officer of this city, in markets where nobody has heard of the emperor's laws, precisely because everyone has learned that it will be the same weight and the same purity as the last one. Traders in distant places have been known to prefer it to their own. Most people will not see many of these. A gold piece is a serious sum. It's what a rent is reckoned in, or a soldier's pay over a stretch, or the price of something that will last a lifetime. The coin you actually spend is bronze, a folly's. It's fat and heavy and slightly crude, and it's the one in the baker's hand earlier. On the back of it there's a single large letter, filling most of the face, and that letter is a number. It stands for 40, and it means the coin is worth 40 of the smallest units of account. It saved a great deal of arguing when it was introduced. There are smaller coins with different letters, halves and quarters, and the letters do the same job. The design was overhauled by the present emperor about a dozen years ago. One of the changes was to put the year of his reign on the reverse, spelled out beside the letter. It is a small courtesy to anyone who keeps accounts, because a coin can now be placed to a single year of the reign just by reading it. On the front is the emperor. Early in the reign, the head was in profile, the old way. Later it turns to face you straight on, helmeted, holding a globe. A face looking directly out of a coin is a different kind of object from a face in profile. It doesn't sit in a scene. It looks at whoever is holding it. Coins wear. Pick up a well-used bronze, and the letters are soft, and the face is a smooth suggestion. The edges are rounded, and it's greasy from hands. Coins get clipped and copied and passed anyway. Old pieces from previous reigns circulate alongside new ones. So a purse in this city is a small, untidy museum. The changer's trade sits on all of that. He knows weights. He knows which mints run light. He has a small balance with bronze weights in a box, and he charges for the service of telling you what you actually have. His booth is shut. His scales are inside in a locked chest. The stone counter is cold under your hand. Somebody has scratched a rough line game into it in the corner for the weighting. The lamp above the booth burns on. Nobody comes to change anything at this hour. Walk back down toward the water by a different way, through the quarter where people from elsewhere keep their lodgings and their warehouses. There are several such quarters, and they aren't fenced off from anything. They are simply where a man who has come a long way goes first, because someone there will speak to him in his own words. The everyday language of this city is Greek. Almost everything you have overheard tonight has been Greek, in the ordinary spoken form, which is not the language of the old books and has not been for a long time. Latin is still here, in the law courts and the army and on some of the coins. The emperor's great gathering of the laws was put together in Latin within living memory. In the street it's fading. A young clerk copying legal texts may be working in a language he doesn't speak at home. Past that there are the others, Syrians and a great many of them, merchants and shipowners and craftsmen, with a language of their own that they read and write and sing in. Their quarter smells different in the evenings because they cook different things. Tonight there's a scent of cumin and hot oil coming from a doorway. A man is talking to a boy in a voice that rises at the end of each phrase. Goths and other men from the north, mostly soldiers or connected to soldiers, taller on average than the crowd around them, with their hair worn long. Their speech comes across in fragments, heavier and more clipped than Greek. The city has been hearing it for generations, without much liking it or much minding it. Persians, here to trade, whose caravans and ships carry the goods that come from further east still. They are the middlemen for the silk we saw, and for a good deal besides. Relations between the two empires shift with the decade, and none of that is the business of a man selling pepper on a Tuesday. Egyptians and Africans off the grain ships, in the harbor quarters during the sailing season, gone by winter. Armenians, traders from the Black Sea coast with furs and wax and salt fish. Men from the western provinces who find this city too rich and too crowded and say so. Everyone here is a little foreign to somebody. This is a city where being from elsewhere is not remarkable. The person taking your money may well be speaking his third language to do it. The lodging in front of us has a lamp over the door and a bench outside it that nobody's sitting on now. Two men come out talking hard about a cargo, one in Greek with a heavy accent, the other in Greek with a different heavy accent. They meet in the middle of it and understand each other perfectly. That is the useful thing about a trading tongue. It doesn't have to be anyone's best language. It only has to be everyone's second one. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. The two men part at the corner. One goes uphill, the other stands a moment, deciding, then goes down toward the water. The lamp over the door has a moth at it. The bench stays empty. Notice something in this street that you'll now see everywhere. Beside almost every door there's a jar or a bucket, standing full, with a flat stone or a board laid across the top. That's for fire, and fire is the thing this city thinks about more than any enemy. Look at how these houses are built, and you'll see why. The ground floors are stone and brick, solid enough. Above that the floors are timber, the joists are timber, the roofs are timber under their tiles. The upper stories lean out over the lane, so that a house on one side is a short jump from the house opposite. Between them, there's a strip of night sky about the width of a cart. There are rules. There have been rules for a long time about how high a man may build, how far he must stand back from his neighbor, how much light and view he owes the house behind him. There are rules about where a trade with a furnace may set up and where it may not. Every one of those rules exists because somebody did the opposite and it went badly. The rules also lose. Land in the middle of a city is worth too much to leave empty. People build where they can and add a floor when the family grows, and an inspector can only be in one place. So there are the jars, and there are more than jars. Public fountains at the crossings, fed off the aqueduct line, which are for drinking and washing all day, and are also, without anyone saying so, a water supply at arm's reach in every quarter. There are cisterns under a great many buildings. There are men in the prefect's service whose business includes exactly this. The methods are simple and mostly about stopping things spreading rather than putting anything out. Wet cloth over a doorway, water thrown on the timber of the next house, rather than on the flames of this one. Hooks on long poles for pulling a burning roof down flat, so it can't throw sparks. A row of men passing buckets from a fountain, which is slow and which works. Nothing is burning tonight. That's worth saying plainly, because we're not going anywhere near that. Tonight is an ordinary night, and the jars stand full beside the doors, and nobody touches them. In the morning, somebody will top up the one outside their own house, because the level dropped from evaporation. Walk on and count them. There's one with a chipped rim and a cloth over it. There's another, taller, with a wooden lid and a stone on the lid. Here's a house with two, on either side of the step, which tells you something about the man inside. Reach in and touch the water in one. It's colder than the air, and there's a leaf in it. There's a fine grit at the bottom that lifts and swirls when you move your hand. It takes a long while to settle. A cat drinks from the one on the corner, delicately, and then walks off along the wall. The jars stand where they always stand. The street sleeps behind them. There's a lodging house at the bottom of the lane with its door still open, which at this hour means somebody is expected or somebody is not yet back. Go in. The entry passage is wide enough for an animal, because it has to be. It leads straight through into a small courtyard, with a stable along one side. The floor of the passage is brick-laid on edge in a herringbone, worn into two smooth tracks. The courtyard has a lamp on a hook and a water trough, and a heap of straw under a lean-to. 3 mules stand at the rail with their heads low, tied loosely, resting a hind foot each. One of them shifts, and the tack on the wall behind knocks together softly. The whole yard smells of animal and straw and dung and dust, which is a warm smell, and not at all a bad one to fall asleep near. The rooms are up a wooden stair on 2 sides. They are small and they are shared. A traveler pays for a place, not a room. What he gets is a mattress of straw ticking on a low frame. There's a blanket that has been under a great many people, and a peg on the wall. If he has anything worth stealing, he sleeps with it under his head. Everybody does, so nobody thinks it rude. Inside one room, there are 4 men asleep and one awake, sitting on the edge of his bed in the dark with his elbows on his knees. He has come off a ship today, and his balance hasn't caught up yet. Lying down in a building that doesn't move is doing him no favors. Downstairs, in the front room, the keeper is still up. He's counting something into a box by the light of a lamp, and he doesn't hurry, and he stops twice to start again. On the shelf behind him there are jars of wine, shallow bowls, a basket of onions. There's a smell of cabbage and vinegar from a pot that was on the fire earlier and has been pulled to the side. 2 men sit at the one table with cups in front of them, well-watered wine, talking low. One of them has a piece of bread and is tearing it slowly without eating much of it, which is what a man does when he's talking about something that worries him and doesn't want to say so. Inns in this city have a reputation, and it's not entirely fair, and it's not entirely undeserved. Travelers complain about the noise and the prices and the fleas, and travelers have complained about exactly those 3 things in every century that has left us any writing at all. Tonight it's quiet. The keeper closes the box and pushes it under the counter with his foot. The 2 men finish and go up the stair, and the boards announce every step, and then there's a door and then nothing. The keeper goes out to the passage and swings the street door to, and drops the bar. The sound of it is the same sound as the city gate at dusk, only much smaller. He puts the lamp out with a pinch of his fingers. The yard keeps only the stars. Out of the lodging house by the yard gate, down a stepped lane, and there's the water again. This is a different water from the harbor, with its big hulls. This is a shingle landing on the Strait side, with small boats pulled up on it, and it's where the fish come from. The boats are open and light, 5 or 6 paces long, built for 2 or 3 men. There's a small sail that isn't up tonight. They are pulled clear of the water on rollers, and there are net piles beside them and floats of cork on a line, a stone anchor with a hole drilled in it. 2 of the boats are out. You can see them because they carry a light. Each one has a small iron basket over the bow with a fire in it, or a lamp under a shade, throwing light down onto the water rather than out. It makes a moving pool of green gold on the black surface, and it looks entirely magical, and it is a working tool. Fish come to it. The autumn run is on. Every year, as the weather turns, fish come down the Strait from the sea in the north in numbers that make this one of the great fishing places anyone knows about. They come in dense shoals with the current, moving through a narrow channel, and boats meet them with nets that can be shot across the flow. Writers of the ancient world remarked on it. Nobody who has lived here needs telling. On the shingle, a man is working a net that came in earlier, sitting on an upturned crate with the net across his knees, mending with a wooden needle. He finds the broken mesh by feel, ties, moves on, feels for the next. He isn't looking much. His hands know the size of the mesh, better than his eyes do in this light. The smell here is fish and salt and wet net and tar, and under it the cold mineral smell of the Strait itself. Along the top of the shingle there are drying racks with split fish on them, stiff, going leathery, catching a little of the starlight. Salt fish matters enormously. Fresh fish feeds this city today. Salted and dried fish feeds it in weeks when nothing can be caught. It travels and it's cheap, and a great deal of it is packed into jars and shipped out. A barrel of salt fish is a plain and unromantic thing that quietly holds a lot of the empire together. Down at the edge, the water is doing very little. Small waves fold over on the shingle, one every few seconds, and pull back through the stones with a rattling hiss that's the loudest sound here. One of the lit boats is coming in. You hear the oars first, then a low word between the two men, then the bow grinds up on the stones. They step out into the shallows in bare feet, in water that must be cold enough to sting, and haul her up 2 lengths and no further. There's a basket in the bottom of the boat with fish in it, silver and dark-backed. Still now. They cover the basket with wet sacking. The fire in the bow is doused. It hisses once. Stand up on the sea wall above the landing and look east across the water. The Strait here is not wide. It's a channel, not a sea. And on a clear day you can see individual buildings on the other side and make out whether a boat over there is coming or going. Tonight the far shore is a long, low black mass against a sky that's slightly less black, with hills behind it. At one point on it there's a light. It's a fire, not a lamp. It's steady in the middle and restless at the edges in the way. Only a real flame is. It's kept up high, and it's tended, because it does not go out or dip while you watch it. There's a town over there called Chalcedon, older than this city. There have been lights kept on the Asian shore for as long as anyone can remember. What the tower or the platform under this one looked like at this date, honestly, we cannot say. Descriptions of a proper lighthouse on that coast come from other centuries. It's easy to read them backward into this one and imagine something grander than what stands there. A fire on a height, tended by men who are paid to tend it, is all we can say with any confidence. What it's for is plain enough from here. Look down at the water between us and it. The surface is not still. There's a current running down the middle from the north. It shows as a long streaked seam with a slightly different texture. And near the shore, the water is doing something quite different again. For a small boat crossing at night, that light is a fixed point. You don't steer at it. You steer to keep it in a certain relation to yourself, over your shoulder or off your bow. The current does the rest, and you land more or less where you meant to. Every ferryman on this water has his own set of rules about it that he could not really explain if asked. The wind has dropped since the walls. That happens on autumn nights here, and the water flattens with it, and sound starts traveling ridiculously far. You can hear an oar working somewhere out there, quite clearly, and see nothing at all. Behind us the city is a black slope, with a scatter of small lights on it. Ahead that one fire. Between the two, a channel of moving water with nothing on it. Sit down on the wall with your back against the parapet, out of what's left of the wind. The stone has a rough top, and lichen on it that you can feel with your fingertips. The fire on the far shore flares slightly. Someone over there has put wood on. Then it settles back to what it was. It will burn until it's light. Stay on the wall a while longer, because the water in front of us is worth understanding. Everyone who lives here understands part of it. The strait joins two seas. To the north, past the top of the channel, there's a great sea fed by enormous rivers, so it stands a little higher and it's less salty. To the south, there's another sea, the Propontis, and past that another. Those are saltier and warmer. Water always settles that argument the same way. The lighter, fresher water at the top runs south along the surface, and the heavier, saltier water underneath runs north. So there are two rivers here, one above the other, going opposite ways. The men in the boats below do not describe it in those terms, but they use it every day. There's a well-known way of holding a weighted net deep and letting the lower flow carry a boat back up against the surface current. And versions of that trick were written down in the ancient world with a good deal of puzzlement attached. The explanation came much later. The use came first, as it usually does. Along the shore, there's a third thing happening. Where the channel bends, the main flow goes wide, and the water close to the bank turns and runs back the other way in a long, slow eddy. Every bend on both shores has one. A boatman going up against the current hugs the bank and rides those eddies from one to the next. A stranger who takes the middle, because it looks like the direct line, will row all night and arrive nowhere. You can see some of this from up here in the dark, which is the surprising part. The seam of the main current catches the sky differently from the still water beside it. There's a long pale dark streak down the middle of the channel. It stays roughly in the same place while everything moves through it. Nearer in, where the eddy runs, the surface is smoother and holds the reflection of that far fire in a long wobbling line. Now and then something breaks the surface out there once, and the ring goes out and gets swallowed by the flow. Put your hand on the parapet and lean over. The smell coming up is cold and salt and weedy and clean. Down at the base of the wall, the water works quietly against the stone, lifting a hand's width and dropping back. And there's a fringe of weed at that level that lifts and lies down with it. That fringe is a tide mark of a kind, though the tides here are very small compared with an ocean coast, and mostly what moves the water is the wind and the flow from the north. Sailors from the far west find this water strange for exactly that reason. The city behind us has fewer lights than it did an hour ago. The Strait is going to keep doing this all night, whether anyone watches or not. Two seas, one channel, and a slow argument between them that never gets settled. A gull lands on the parapet 10 paces off. It tucks down and stops moving. Come down off the seawall and walk west along the shore road, slowly. There's no hurry now, and there's nowhere we have to be. And this is a good stretch for walking without a purpose. On the landward side there are houses, and then a gap, and then houses again. The gap is a real one, not a lane. It's a piece of ground with low walls still standing on it, waist high, marking out rooms that no longer have a roof or a floor or anybody in them. Grass has come up between the stones. Somebody has put a goat in there, and a rope across the opening. There are gaps like that in a good many quarters. Ask an older person about it, and they'll tell you plainly that there were more people here once. A plague came through the whole empire a few years before tonight. It reached this city with the grain ships. It emptied houses in every quarter, and the years since have been quieter years. People speak of it briefly, the way they speak of a hard winter that took the vines, and then they talk about something else. We'll do the same and let them. What's left is visible in small ways rather than large. A workshop with 2 benches and 1 worker, a street with 3 houses standing empty, and their shutters barred from the inside by a relative who lives elsewhere. Rents that are easier than the old people remember. A little more room on the pavement. The city is still enormous. It is still one of the largest places anyone in this world has ever seen. The harbor is still full, and the grain still comes, and the streets by day are still packed shoulder to shoulder. It's simply not as full as it was. And the people who remember the difference are not the ones who talk about it most. Walk on. The road here runs between the seawall and the backs of houses. It's a service road, so it's narrow and it smells of the shore. There are steps down to the water, every so often with a chain to hold on to. At the bottom of one of them a small boat is tied up, empty, knocking gently against the stone. The lights on the slope above have thinned right out. Earlier there were dozens. Now you can count them. And most of them are the fixed street lamps and not windows. Between two seas, the city keeps its own hours. Somewhere above us, a shutter is pulled closed and latched. A last one. The road ahead is empty as far as the light goes. Keep walking. There's nothing here to look at. That's the good part. There's a stretch of the night in every city that belongs to nobody, and this is it. The people who work late are finished. The people who start early haven't started. The lamps that were lit for a purpose have burned down or been put out. The ones still going are going out of habit. Nothing is opening and nothing is closing. Walk into the middle of a small square and stand still and listen to what's actually there. The wind, which has dropped to almost nothing, moving the leaves of one tree that hasn't lost them all yet. A trickle from the fountain on the corner, continuous, that you didn't notice at all earlier when there were other sounds, and that now seems quite loud. A dog turning over on a step and sighing, somewhere further off. A shutter that isn't latched properly, tapping every so often when the air moves. Under all of it, there's a low, continuous hush that isn't any one thing. It's the sea on both sides of the city at once. The shingle on the Strait and the water against the harbor wall, arriving here as one flat sound with no direction to it. In daylight, you never hear it. At this hour, it's the floor under everything else. The fountain is worth going to. It's a stone basin against a wall with a spout above it. The spout runs day and night because there's no way to stop it and no reason to. The basin is full and overflowing at one corner into a channel that runs off down the lane. The stone around the spout has a thick pale crust on it, the same lime you saw in the aqueduct, built up in ridges and folds like something poured. Cup your hand under the spout. The water is cold enough to ache, and it tastes faintly of stone. This is the same water that came out of the hills in Thrace, and rode the arches over the valley, and sat in the dark under the columns. It has been traveling for days to arrive at this corner. Now it falls into this basin in the small hours, with nobody drinking it. Above the rooftops, the sky has more stars in it than it did earlier, because so many lamps have gone out. The band of the way across the sky is visible from here, faint, running over the ridge of the roof opposite. The moon set a while ago. It was thin tonight, a bright cut low in the west after sunset. It went down early and took no part in the rest of this, so the shadows now are star shadows, which means there are almost none. The streets are simply dark, and the walls are simply pale. Sit on the edge of the fountain basin. The stone is wet and cold, and the wet comes through, and it doesn't matter much. This hour will not be recorded anywhere. Nobody writes down an ordinary night. The fountain runs. Nothing else happens for a long time. Go up from the square west into a part of the city that surprises visitors. The walls out on the landward side were built far out, further than the houses ever reached. The ground between the last streets and the wall is not built on. It's worked. There are gardens in here, real ones, market gardens with beds and paths and wells, inside the defenses. A city that might one day have to shut its gates, for a season, took the trouble to put a good deal of growing ground inside them. In the meantime, it feeds the markets every morning of the year. The paths between the plots are beaten earth, and at this hour they are damp and slightly greasy underfoot. Where the path crosses a channel, there's a plank. The whole area smells of turned soil and old straw, and the sharp green of cut cabbage stalks. And there's wood smoke from a hut somewhere at the edge. It's late autumn, and the beds show it. Half of them are bare and dug over in rough clods that will break down over the winter frosts. In the others there's what stands the cold. Cabbages in rows with their outer leaves flopped and going purple at the edges, leeks banked up with earth around their stems, turnips with their tops going ragged. The bean poles have been pulled and stacked in a wigwam against a wall. Along one side there's a vine, cut hard back, its trunk thick and gray and twisted, with the year's growth trimmed off and lying in a heap for kindling. Beyond it 2 fig trees with nothing on them at all, their branches pale and blunt, the last leaves down and blackened underneath. Put your hand on the soil in a dug bed. It's cold and heavy and holds the shape of your fingers, and there's a shine on the clods where the dew has settled. Water is the whole business of a garden in a dry summer here, and every plot has its arrangement. There's a well with a windlass and a bucket, and beside it a cistern that catches roof runoff from the shed. Little channels run between the beds with stones for gates. Tonight nothing needs watering. The rain came 2 days ago, and there's more coming. At the far end there's a low hut with a lamp in it, and a man asleep by the door. Somebody sleeps here most nights, not against thieves in any serious way, but because gardens have their losses to animals, and because a man who owns 40 rows of cabbages sleeps better near them. His donkey is tied under the lean-to with a blanket over its back. It looks at us without lifting its head, decides nothing is happening, and closes its eyes again. Beyond the last bed, the great wall stands up black against the stars, and everything in front of it is growing. The frost will come in a week or 2. Not tonight. Come back down into the streets, and something has changed. Not much, but there's a smell of wood smoke that wasn't there an hour ago, and it's coming from more than one direction. The bakers are up. They're always the first, in every city that has ever had bakers, because bread has to be ready when everyone else wakes, and bread takes hours it won't be argued out of. Go back to the street we stood in at dusk. The iron door of the oven is open again, and the fire is in. The light of it is coming out onto the paving in a long fan. Inside, the boy is feeding split wood in at the front, and the flames are going up over the top of the dome and along the roof of it, which is exactly what should happen. The oven doesn't cook with fire, it cooks with hot brick, so the fire burns inside it now. In a while it will be raked out entirely, and what's left will be a stone room holding a huge amount of heat. The baker is at the trough. The dough went together last night and has been standing since, slow and cool, and it's alive in a way you can see. He turns it out onto the board and it sags and spreads, and there's a smell off it that's sour and sweet at once, closer to beer than to bread. He works it with the heels of his hands, folding and pushing, and turning it a quarter each time. It's heavy work, and the sound of it is a soft, irregular slapping. His shoulders are doing most of it, and his face is doing nothing at all. He has made this dough perhaps 4,000 times. None of them can tell you what makes it rise. It's understood as a property of old dough, that a piece kept back from yesterday and worked into today's batch will do the thing. That if you fail to keep the piece back you're in trouble. The reasoning stops there, and it does not need to go further. The knowledge is entirely in the hands. He cuts the mass into portions with a blade, weighs them roughly by feel, and rounds each one with a quick circling motion against the board that pulls the surface tight. Then they go on a flowered cloth to rest, in rows under a sack. The boy rakes the fire forward and out. Ash comes into a metal box in a hot gray slide, with sparks in it that go up and die halfway. He mops the oven floor with a wet cloth on a pole. It hisses, and steam comes out of the mouth in a fast white breath and up the wall of the shop. Then he tests the heat by throwing a pinch of flour onto the floor of it and watching how fast it browns. Not black, not slow, somewhere in the middle. He nods and goes to fetch the peel. The first loaves go in on the long blade, 4 at a time. The door swings shut on them. The market square is 2 streets from the baker's, and it's still dark, and it's already being built. By day this is trestles and awnings and shouting. By night it's an empty paved space, with the frames stacked against the wall of the church at one end. Men are pulling those frames out now and carrying them into position, 2 to a load, walking a little bent. The trestles go down first, then boards across them. The sound of a board dropping onto a trestle in an empty square at this hour is enormous. It goes right round the buildings and comes back. Nobody minds. This has happened at this hour for as long as the square has been here. The people who live around it sleep through it the way you sleep through a familiar stair. The first goods to arrive are the ones from inside the walls. A handcart of cabbages comes in from the gardens, pushed by 2 men, 1 at each shaft. The wheels are iron-tired, and they make a hard racket on the paving. Then leeks, in bundles, tied with a twist of their own leaves. Then a sack of walnuts, and a basket of quinces going yellow, and a stack of flat baskets of dried figs pressed into cakes. The fish comes up from the landing on poles between 2 men, in shallow crates, packed with wet weed. It's laid out on a stone slab that's used for nothing else, and washed down every day. It's the only thing here that has to be sold before the sun is high. A woman sets out a stack of shallow bowls of curd cheese, each covered with a leaf. Another has eggs in a basket of chaff, and she puts them out 1 at a time with 2 hands. Every so often holds one up to her lamp for a moment before she sets it down. The lamps are the pretty part. Each stall has one, on a hook or a stick, and as the square fills up the lights arrive one by one, until there's a loose constellation of them at chest height across the whole space, each with a person moving around inside its circle. Nobody is selling yet. There's a rule about when trading may start, and there are officers who care about it. And in any case, there are no customers. What's happening now is arrangement and pride. Watch the man with the quinces build them into a pyramid, take one off, put it back somewhere else, and step around to look at the stack from where a buyer will stand. The smells are arriving in layers. Wet fish, bruised cabbage leaves, quince, which is the strongest and best of them, sweet and sharp, and carrying right across the square. Between 2 seas, the city keeps its own hours. Somebody yawns audibly. Somebody laughs at him. The lamps go on being lit. Leave the square before it fills and go down the hill again to the harbor. This is the last time we'll go downhill tonight. The Golden Horn is flat, calm, and completely black, and the ships on it are only shapes with no detail in them yet. Out past the mouth, the Bosporus is doing what it did all night, moving south with its long seam down the middle. The ferrymen are here. They're always here before anyone needs them. Their boats are tied along the lower quay in a row. The men are standing about in 2s on the stone, arms folded inside their cloaks, breathing out steam. One of them is bailing his boat with a wooden scoop, unhurried, a few cupfuls at a time, tipping it over the side. The sound of the water going back into the harbor is the clearest sound on the whole waterfront. Another is coiling a rope on the quay in flat rings. When he's done, he picks up the coil and hangs it on the toll pin, and it stays exactly as he made it. There's a small pleasure in watching anybody do a thing they've done 10,000 times. The first crossing goes when there's someone to carry, and there's someone now. 3 men come down the steps with tools in a bag, going over to Siki for a day's work. They step in one after another, and the boat rocks and settles deeper. Nobody says a fare. It's understood. The ferryman pushes off with an oar against the stone and turns her, and gets both oars into the water. He rows facing forward the way men on this water do, standing and pushing rather than sitting and pulling, so he can see what he's steering into. Watch the boat go out. It gets smaller and vaguer, and then it's a dark blot with a soft white mark behind it. The sound of the oars stays clear long after the shape has gone uncertain. A knock in the rowlock, and then a small splash over and over, slowing when he lets her run. Now look east, past the end of the horn, over the low black land on the far side. The sky there is not black anymore. It's the very first change, and it's not light and not color. If you'd looked 5 minutes ago, you'd have said it was the same as everywhere else. Now the hills over there have an edge on them. You can see where the land stops. That's all it is so far. An edge. The gulls know. They've started moving along the waterfront. A few at first, dropping onto the mooring posts and standing there. The ferryman's oars go on out in the dark, further off. They get quieter. This is the last of it, and it's the quietest hour there is. The lamps in the streets have been burning since dusk, and most of them have used up their oil. They aren't going out all at once. They're going down, each one shrinking to a small blue-edged flame lying flat in the bottom of its dish, then to a red thread, and then to a smell. The watch is finishing. The 2 men we followed hours ago come along the bottom of the street on their last pass, and they're not trying doors now. They're just walking out of habit, and the lamp between them is nearly done too. In the great church, the man on the movable stair is putting out ranks of lamps with a snuffer on a pole, working along a row. And as each rank goes dark, the gold overhead loses another layer, and the space above the arches goes further away. In the monastery on the hill, the night office ended a while ago, and the men went back to their cells. The wooden board hangs on its cord by the door, not touched. In the baker's street, the first loaves are out and cooling on a rack and ticking as they cool. In the market square, the quinces are stacked. On the shingle by the landing, the nets are mended and folded. Everyone who worked tonight is nearly finished. Everyone who works today has not quite begun. For a little while in between, the whole place is doing almost nothing. Feel how still the air is. There's no wind at all now. The smoke from the ovens is going straight up in thin gray lines that you can just make out against the sky. It holds together for a long way before it lets go. The walls out on the west are still completely dark. The gardens inside them are dark. The cistern under the city is exactly as it was. 336 columns standing in still water with nobody to see them. The drip landing every few seconds in the dark, as it will all day and all tomorrow night. The Strait is turning silver at the far edge, not the near edge yet. Between 2 seas, the city keeps its own hours. It kept them all night while we walked, and it's keeping them now. There's nothing left for us to look at. Everything we came for has happened, and it happened quietly, and none of it was written down by anyone. So let it go. Let the walls and the water and the lamps go. Let the long street with its columns fall away. The warm doorway of the bakery, and the sound of the board in the yard. You don't have to remember any of it. That was never the point. Asleep now. The city has this. This was worlds before morning.